Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, this is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this podcast. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. I'm driving down Interstate 70. It's beginning to storm outside. I hope this podcast finds everybody well. So, council is back from their break from July. We're back from our break from following city council in Huber Heights. And we're going to take a pause while it's raining. Stand by, we'll be right back. All right, small little downpour just came through. And had to pause the recording just for a second. Cruising down the highway, didn't want to be too distracted. So, like I was saying, council had a work session. Then they had a council meeting last week, the 13th of August. Today, the 20th of August, they have another work session. One of the items, I'm interested in a lot of the items that are on tonight's work session. I'm interested in the discussion on a number of the items, but there's one particular item that I'm very interested in, and that is the Veterans Memorial. If you've been paying attention, then you know that council voted no for the location of the memorial. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that, and I'll try to explain that here in a second, but from my understanding, the reason council voted no on the location of the memorial, it wasn't the memorial itself. And I think that's important because I do believe that all the council members, the city as a whole, want to see a memorial in the city of Huber Heights for veterans. Now, the reason council voted no on the location is because of Thomas Cloud Park. Now, for a lot of us, and not everyone, there are some out there, especially the Military and Veterans Commission that was newly enacted by the current Mayor Gore. They recommended Thomas Cloud Park. And I, not to get into the political end of it, but I have an idea of why that was recommended. But it's not an appropriate place for a memorial for many different reasons. The Parks Division, the Parks and Recs Board, are trying to organize the city parks. And one of the things that they're trying to do is figure out how to accommodate all the user groups at Cloud Park, the sports user groups, soccer, baseball, softball, everyone. And not to mention there's a lot of recreation amenities there at Cloud Park. Many shelters that are used for different gatherings, the splash pad, the different playgrounds, the exercise equipment, the list goes on. So Cloud Park has been identified as not appropriate by a lot of people. One of those who identified it as not being appropriate for a Veterans Memorial was the Huber Heights Veterans Project. Now, I was a part of that since its inception, and I know intimately the details of why Thomas Cloud Park was not chosen. It was suggested to us by a current council member, and we steered away from it for many different reasons. One being that we have spoken to Parks and Rec. We have walked the park. We have talked to other veterans in the VFW, other veterans at AMVETS, other veterans, I believe, at the American Legion. So there's just a lot of different folks that HHVP talked to about putting a memorial in Thomas Cloud because it wasn't off the list. We wanted to look at everything. We looked at Manita Park. Manita Park was the old YMCA pool. If you're as old as I am, then you remember it as a pool. I went there as a kid. But it had since closed. And they filled it in, and it was a large green space. We know there's water and electric ran there. I believe there are still baseball diamonds there. So we looked at Moneta Park. We looked at Belle Plaine Park. We looked at Cottonwood Park. We looked at all these centrally located parks. Another reason we looked at Moneta Park was because it was down the street from Schur Cemetery, where they do the historical society, and in conjunction with the VFW, do a ceremony on Memorial Day each year. Because if you haven't been to Schur Park, it's on Fishburg. There is, I believe he's a private from the Civil War buried in Schur Park. Huber Heights and Wayne Township have a vast history in regard to military affairs. Now, whether it be serving the military, whether it be a civilian in support of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, whether it be veterans who went off and served maybe throughout the country, throughout the world, and then came home. Huber Heights is a military town. It truly is. So a veterans memorial is definitely needed. Definitely needed, and it's long overdue. HHVP stepped out of the way. They did when the Military and Veterans Commission was enacted earlier this year. We stepped out. We disbanded. We gave the Military and Veterans Commission all the efforts that we had, from donations we received, merchandise we received, all the renderings that we had drawn up. There were 3 different drawings. The one we settled on is the one I think I would like to see move forward. Hopefully they don't change it too much. And with that, the center monument is something like the location that we are going to be very involved in, and we are going to voice our opinion, especially myself. The center monument was to be dedicated to the men and women who sacrificed it all, the ultimate sacrifice. It's for those who were killed in action. And there are some signs throughout Huber Heights recognizing some of those sacrifices. But throughout this whole process, we, HHVP, has talked to many veterans. And I remember sitting in a restaurant in Huber Heights, and I would talk to anybody who wanted to listen about the Veterans Memorial, because I wanted to get the word out. Hey, we need this, blah, blah, blah. And I talked to someone in a restaurant, and they said, hey, do you know, I'll just say this person, do you know this person? He was killed in Vietnam. And he lived here in Wayne Township at the time. So, the center monument is something that we, as HHVP, wanted to see dedicated to those who were killed in action, missing in action, or prisoners of war. That center monument we wanted dedicated to them. So if you look at the design, the city has the design. It's also up on Huber Heights Veterans Project Facebook page. You can check that out. We like the design. I can go in more on the design later. For now, we'll just stick to location. So Cloud Park, we looked at a bunch of parks, and we opposed Cloud Park in the end because after looking at Moneta, after looking at Belle Plaine and Cottonwood and all those parks that were within that center of town area, and may I say, we were possibly looking at private land as well for maintenance reasons and just a number of different reasons to help keep it out of the taxpayer's budget. We felt it would be important to work and earn the donations to build the memorial, and then it would be a community event. We invited everybody to the meetings, we posted them, we tried to get as much as we could. So location. It was mentioned to us, I believe it was a meeting we had with a city staffer, and they said, have you looked at Gary Sherman Park right here behind City Hall? And we at the time, we said, we have. we looked through it, but, let's go look at it again. So we did. And we went back there. And the folks I had with me, I believe at the time, was Roxanne Britton, who was a member of the HHVP board, and Alan Luff, who was a member of the board as well. And we both went back there. They really, really loved it. I was convinced. I was like, you're right. There was a tire blowout here on the highway. Glad everybody's safe. See, live podcasting or recorded podcasting. Man, that sucks. Poor guy. He was a working dump truck guy in a Mack truck driving down the road, blew out a tire. But he managed to keep it on the road, and hopefully he'll get it fixed up and make his deliveries. All right. Live podcasting, ladies and gentlemen. You may have heard that. It was kind of loud. So we went back. I was convinced. Everybody that I was with was convinced. We took it back to our board and said, hey, we looked at Gary Sherman Park. It provides a large green space. It provides a location, a security for the location, being that it's right there by the court building, the police station. The court building, you're going to have, during the day, you're going to have police officers from all over the county coming there. Right there, when you turn out of the building, you got to look left to look at the memorial and look right. So it would provide that part of the, it would provide additional security. And I know it's been mentioned that, just because you have a police presence doesn't guarantee security. Nobody has ever said we're going to guarantee anything. There are no guarantees. We understand that. But the way I look at things, and the way I think a lot of us look at things, is that when you have a police presence, you do to deter crime with a police presence. That's common knowledge. So trying to argue against that, to me, is silly. So green space, police station, court building, it's on Veterans Memorial Parkway. The green space not only allows enough room for the memorial to be built and potentially expanded throughout time, one of our initial ideas was to place a building close to the memorial with a classroom, because we wanted to not only have the memorial have pieces that describe and would help educate classrooms or homeschool groups or kids in the neighborhood or whoever wanted to learn about the Revolutionary War, all the way up to the conflict we see now with the war on terrorism. A classroom would help educate those coming to visit the memorial. So there was a lot of things that was wrapped up into this. Location, I think, is important. Visibility is important, but it's not the only important piece of the pie. Now, Sherman Park, I know that the argument is, well, it's way back here, nobody sees it, I didn't even know it was there. Listen, we're in a different time. We can put up signs, the Veterans Memorials behind City Hall. It is city government. There are many people that go back there. There are folks who go back on court. There is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There is the city newspaper. There are press releases. There are ways to get the word out of where the memorial is. Hopefully, the city, being that they've taken it over, will commit to a Veterans Day and Memorial Day celebration and remembrance for the veterans at that memorial. That's another piece that we would have. The list goes on for why Gary Sherman Park would be appropriate for a Veterans Memorial. So council voted no to take that piece back, and they are going to bring it up tonight at the work session. I will be there. If you hear this in time, come out as well. I will, on the next podcast, I'll play the discussion from tonight so we all can listen to it and go from there.